Hello and welcome back to Seagulls Central. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. If you're new here, welcome along. And if you have been here before, welcome back to the channel. It's so good to have everybody here. I'm very, very grateful for you being here. Really quickly, if you haven't already, and you've enjoyed the content, you find yourself coming back for more each week by week, hit the subscribe button. It really means a lot. Right, let's get into it really quickly. Massive story dropping in the last hour or so around the future of Evan Ferguson. Look, it's done. It's over. Evan Ferguson is essentially, for what it's worth, I think for what we can all kind of really, if we're going to speak about facts and get in the real world, Evan Ferguson's future at Brighton and Hove Albion is over. A loan deal with an obligation / option to buy, with him moving to Roma at the obligation around 40 million euros, is done. It's been here we go by Fabrizio Romano, and he's going to be having a medical in the coming days. This deal will be wrapped up. Evan Ferguson will no longer be a Brighton player. 20 years old. Obviously, you'll remember it as well as I do, the way he burst onto the scene. You know, I know that phrase is used a lot now. But he really was, particularly after we'd had the Aaron Connolly kind of episode where a player looked so promising but failed to deliver. I think we kind of all checked ourselves and thought, oh my God, we thought this guy was good. Actually, Ferguson's the real deal. And I've said it multiple times. Evan Ferguson is the real deal. I will die on that hill. I believe he will prove to be that player that I think he is, and I imagine a lot of the people watching this video think Evan Ferguson is. But he is moving on. He is leaving Brighton. Whether we want to call it that or not, he's likely gone permanently. Let me read out what Fabrizio Romano has tweeted in the last hour or so. I'm recording this literally an hour after he's tweeted it. How interesting. I just checked the minutes and it's literally an hour after he tweeted it. So this is the tweet. Evan Ferguson to AS Roma. Here we go. Deal agreed with Brighton on an initial loan with a 40 million euro buy option included. Ferguson preferred Roma ahead of several clubs who were keen, and the agreement is now verbally agreed within all parties. Brighton approved. Medical on its way. So, look, one thing I'll say is in terms of the use of the wording here, he's used the word, buy option. And I think you and I, we're probably both at as much of a loss as each other, in the sense that what does this kind of buy option versus buy obligation really mean? I've always got the impression that, the obligation was that if the player achieves, let's say, kind of 20 goal involvements, 30 goal involvements, or the team finishes in a certain position, that's when the loan is obliged to become permanent. The use of the word option's interesting. It's kind of like, if Roma like him at the end of the loan, they can buy him for a price of 40 million euros. So what does that mean for Brighton? Does that mean that Brighton, let's say in a year's time, Roma don't like the look of him. He's had another West Ham loan. It's not gone brilliantly. He's had a few injuries. They don't like him. We get him back. We don't get our 40 million. Is that a good thing for Brighton? But then, say he goes to Roma, smashes the goals in, is playing in the Champions League, does absolutely brilliantly, or Europa League, sorry, does absolutely brilliantly, and then we get 40 million for him and that's it, done. We can't then get him back. I never really quite understand the terms of these deals, and it is quite confusing. I'm just working on the proviso now that we're getting 40 million for him probably next summer, and then the money, I imagine, will be paid in instalments, and that will be the deal done. This season he's technically our player, but for all intents and purposes he's not, which is sad. For me, it really is sad, because I had held out hope that this would be a player who this season we did still see some involvement in our team. I know we'd obviously brought in players like Kostilas, Charalampos Kostilas and Stefanos Simas. However, I did kind of feel like these players might be ones who they're obviously, everyone's going to be supporting Danny Welbeck next season. I think he will start the season as the number one striker. He's proven that this pre-season. He proved it last season. The club clearly have some faith in Kostilas and some faith in Simas, that they're going to be the players that are going to be challenging him for that number 9 position. Yes, we've got players like Mark O'Mahony out, but Evan Ferguson, I'd always thought, God, if there was a chance for him to come in and start this season really well, get in at pre-season, really prove himself, would we see him get a chance this coming season? Clearly, whoever it is, be it Fabian Hurzeler, be it the club, have made a decision on him. look, maybe it's down to injuries. Maybe the club clearly think this is a player who, yes, in the kind of 2 years that he has been playing professional Premier League football, he has suffered with injuries. And ever since he's had one of those big injuries over, a year ago or so, he's not really come back that same player. I remember watching him almost 2 years ago at the start of the 2023-24 season, the season where we was in Europe, and he obviously scored that hat-trick against Newcastle at the Amex. We'd seen him prior to that playing for Brighton, in the season where we got Europa League football, and he looked brilliant then. And he really started that season when we were in the Europa League with such quality, and he looked so brilliant. And it felt like, and that's why I say that it felt a bit different to the Connolly one, because, well, it is different to the Connolly one, I guess, because we're selling a player for 40 million euros, and Connolly was a player who ended up, God knows, what did we even do? Sell him to Hull, did we? So it is different. We're getting good money, very good money. The risk is like, I guess the club now just feel that this isn't a player who's going right to the very top and is worth keeping around. Maybe they believe that actually, from what they've witnessed, from what the people at the club have witnessed, from what we've witnessed, he's not a player who in the next 3-4 years at Brighton, in the Premier League, will be a player who can be the player that we all expect him to be. However, if we send him out to another league, we sell him and we put a fat kind of sell-on clause, even a buyback clause, but a sell-on clause. Actually, maybe that's a better result than having a player, paying his wages, him not performing, his value decreasing, and then us just kind of losing an asset that we could have otherwise made 40 million quid plus maybe a sell-on fee in 3, 4, 5 years' time. You think with the Gyökeres deal, they did have a sell-on with that. Maybe the club are kind of thinking something similar, but actually trying to protect themselves a little bit more strongly than they did in that Gyökeres deal. I think maybe that's the right decision, because we haven't seen in the last year or so any signs that he is going to become what we all expected him to be. And I think that is a fair enough opinion. However, sometimes with players, like, you kind of see all the facts and you see all the stats and you see it with the eye test, but there's something within you that it was like, and this will obviously kind of completely counter my point that I'm trying to make here, but like, it was the way that I kind of really quite liked Fernandone, despite everything that went on with him, and he wasn't great, and he had that red card issue, and the same with like Bernardo, and you kind of watch his play, you think like, no, like, I think there is something there. And I'm using players who didn't do it to illustrate my point, and maybe that is telling me everything I need to know. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, you might watch Ferguson, and I've watched Ferguson, and I've conceded that, yes, in the last year, he hasn't looked great. He has looked a shell of himself. He has looked poorer. However, there's that thing about Ferguson where you just think, this guy's got it. We've seen him do it. And yes, it's easy to do it at 18. Yes, it's easy to do it as a young player. I do take that point. But there's just something about the way he plays. He's got that, as I've said, real deal element. Look, how will his time at Brighton be reflected upon? It'll be reflected upon, I think you can say, pretty successfully. Ultimately, he kind of, at the end of the day, he broke into the side at 18 years old. He, at one point, 2 years ago, he was our starting number 9. Him and Welbeck really, really were shoulder by shoulder, bustling for that number 9 position, really genuinely fighting. He was scoring goals in the Premier League. He was competing in Europe, obviously alongside João Pedro as well. So I think you have to say his time at Brighton has been a success. And if you stand back and zoom out and think about Brighton and what we are and what is success for a Brighton fan, of course, Evan Ferguson has done well at Brighton. He's scored goals in the Premier League. He's contributed to our best ever era as Brighton fans. So he's absolutely been a success. And then you turn around and you get 40 million euros for him. I guess you can say that's a good deal, and if we have a sell on, it's a great deal, I suppose. But there is just that thing where you just think, I feel like he will turn into something special and it won't be with us. And the club have taken that risk. And look, I trust the club. I do trust the club. I'm not going to sit here and say I think they've made a wrong decision, because I don't think it's clear cut enough to say. No one really knows. And I think ultimately the guy needs to go and play football. The guy needs to go and get his mojo back, get his spark back. get that zest back a little bit, get that consistency in minutes. And if that means that at the end of it, we can get £40 million for a young striker who may or may not go on to become elite, 40 million quid, naturally it's a good deal. So I suppose on balance, I've kind of talked to myself. I came into this thinking this is an absolute disgrace and a moment of heartbreak for Brighton fans. I suppose I've kind of talked myself down from that in the sense of thinking perhaps actually you get 40 million for him. He does it. If he does it, that's brilliant. And Brighton will still reap some reward from that. They've got 40 million quid in a buyback. But it is sad because, I wish him luck. I think he will do really well at Roma. I think the Roma fans will love him. I just pray that he doesn't suffer with injuries anymore and he is able to get a good run in that side. A great move for him going to a brilliant City under a fantastic manager in Gasperini. I think he's got all the tools to do really well. And he's clearly a good human, a good pro, got good work ethic. So I do wish him the best. But yeah, a weird moment. Let me know what you think. Are you kind of which side are you on? Is this a tragedy? Are we losing a brilliant player, or is this good money player who maybe isn't what we all thought he would become? Let me know. I'd love to know your thoughts down in the comments below. God, strange one, mixed feelings. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already and you've enjoyed this video, if you've got this far, please hit the subscribe button. Join the community of Brighton fans here who are tuning in to these videos as often as I can do them to talk about the Albion. It's really appreciated. Your views, your comments, your likes, and your subscriptions. It really, really does mean a lot to me. Thank you so much. I will see you on the next one. And as always, up the Albion.